Hey folks, welcome to another one of our Free Friday community classes right here on the YouTubes. This one less a class and more just a little off-the-cuff discussion. These have kind of been my favorite format of doing this material lately, so hopefully you enjoy it too. I want to talk a little bit about the divergence of cunning and wise folk traditions from contemporary witchcraft. And before I get into that, I want to say this is probably one of the most common questions that I get asked on the social medias. What kind of witchcraft do you practice? What tradition are you in? How do I get initiated by you? How are you dovetailing your plant spirit work within a witchcraft framework? And there are some probably more complicated answers to that would be really, I think, inspiring and entertaining. And maybe I'll do another video, but I'll say this. The short answer is not at all. I don't practice witchcraft at all. I don't consider myself a witch. I don't really align to ancestral witchcraft ethics. So that's the easy answer. If that concept of thinking about this is new to you, a lot of how I think about witchcraft right now comes from the work of two scholars that I really, really like. One is Emma Wilby, and the other is Owen Davies. And if you don't know either of them, especially if you're somebody who, practices contemporary witchcraft and really feels like it's a force for harmony and a force for healing in the world, I invite you to read that information. It's just very inspiring and all of that. So I will end the sidebar there and just say this. Contemporary witchcraft is a very different animal than witchcraft would have been even 100 years ago. As witchcraft went through its revival in the late 50s and 60s with folks like Gerald Gardner and Ross Nichols, it took on a systematic approach with grades and initiations taken very heavily from ceremonial magic that has mostly carried through till the now, although I was noticing the other day that there are so few practicing initiatory covens where I live. The ones that were even really well rooted and well established are it's crickets, right? So I think most people just kind of do their own thing now. The initiatory thing is gone. I will speak from personal experience that most, not all, because I know the ones out there that are the exception to the common. Most people are unwilling to do the work it takes to get the initiations, right? We sort of have this entitled thing happening right now where if somebody wants you to work for the information or take your time with it or spend a year and a day studying before you get it, suddenly they're a gatekeeper, which is just not how this is done traditionally. Like when we do things like that, when we say things like that, we're silencing ancestral traditions from across the world where the mentor-apprentice system has been held sacred since time immemorial. So don't do that. Most people will and do, and it is what it is. But I think that's why there are no real, not as many covens as there used to be. And the ones that are around still are fierce, right? They're well established. They're powerful. They're systems that the stewards of those systems have allowed them to evolve and adapt to meet who and when and where we are as people. And so they've stayed pliable instead of getting brittle, right? Another total tangent, right? That has nothing to do with what I want to talk about today. So let's get into it. So if we think about what plant-wise folk might have looked like, you can kind of pick a place. There are, of course, tons of places and cultures and traditions in the world right now that still have active plant spirit workers. They still have people within the community who are in close relationship with plants, who act as emissaries between the green realm and the realm of humans on behalf of their communities. It's not a was thing. This stuff still exists, right? Just in some places has been lost or watered down or silenced, for various different reasons. So if you meditate on, maybe think of some romantic, English village 2,000 or so years ago, what would plant spirit work have looked like, do you think, right? If we just sort of use our imaginal faculties, this is very like non-academic, but what would it look like to be the person who relates with the plants, connects with the plants, stewards them, learns them, works with them, makes medicine and magic and stories with them in service of their human community? You know, there probably were not fancy robes and broadswords and chalices, right? Like that just doesn't make sense for the average person, let alone somebody who was in a very service-oriented position, to have access to that kind of material or need for it, right? So the point I want to make is plant spirit work, as I practice it and as I experience it, I want to put that huge disclaimer on this, because again, there are other traditions of this that might be different, although the agreements are more common than the disagreements, really. Transcends tradition. It transcends a lot of things. You know, it happens sometimes almost in a bubble within the ocean of community. So what I mean by that is, when we look at folklore around wise folk from ages past, the Herbwise, our Herbwise ancestors, we see that people in the communities, you know, heretofore called the villagers, right, just to make it fun, sort of saw them as part of, but also different than. You know, we know from lore that these folks would live kind of on the edge of town. They didn't live in the center of the village where all the hustle and bustle was. They didn't have a stall at the farmer's market. They lived far enough away from the hullabaloo of things that they could maintain their peace and their quiet, but close enough to it that they could see patterns and that they could be accessible. They wanted to live with one foot in the wilds, one foot in the world of the plants and one foot in the cultivated world of the human, so that they could act as bridge, as emissary, as go-between between those two worlds, right? And this is an interesting thing too, because I think about when we go deeper into this sort of imaginal meditation, we might think about what it would take then for some member of the village, some villager, to go seek the counsel of the wise woman who knew the way of herbs. You know, maybe they're forlorn and love-struck, or they're dealing with a fever that won't break, or something weird is happening with their cattle and their cattle won't produce milk. You know, there's something weird going on. That person would have to go on a short pilgrimage. They would have to leave the streets, the organization, as chaotic as that organization may be, of the village, and sort of go other, right? They have, and in so doing, their consciousness would probably alter a little bit. They would slow down. They would step out of familiar territory. You know, their senses might heighten a little bit. And so this, let's say it's a 3-mile walk, right? Would sort of allow them to let go of one thing and step into something else. So hopefully when they get to the wise woman's little hut, nestled up against the hedgerows, against the edge of a forest, surrounded by a meadow, maybe there's some cultivated herbs there and maybe it's all wild, they kind of roll in squishy, right? They come in kind of in a different headspace, a different heart space. And then that person would do their thing, you know, assess, evaluate, discuss, maybe take the person out to gather herbs, make medicine with them, do ritual work with them, energy work with them, blessings, clearings, give them, you know, geish, taboos, things they are not allowed to do for a while, maybe give them prescriptive rituals, things they have to do for a while. And all of those people are unique. You know, there was no school of the Herbwise, right? There was no degree program. There was no guild. I don't even think there were definitely guilds for other kinds of professions, but I don't think this one. So when you went to somebody, everything they did was a combination of everything they were taught by the person who mentored them, the person who sort of saw the Herbwise potential within them and took them under their wings, and then everything they had received as green gnosis from their own personal work woven together. So when you would get a remedy or a formula or a practice, it would be deeply ancestral and have this kind of wave of power behind it, but also completely in the moment, completely relevant to who you are and to how the world is right now. And this is why disciplic succession is the traditional way to learn these arts, right? Because as we pour the tea from our mug into the next person's mug, it allows it to change and adjust and adapt into the moment rather than being this stuck, still, frozen, brittle thing that's so easy to snap. And here's where the big divergence is from witchcraft traditions, that witchcraft tends to get locked in to these traditional models that are a ritual cloak hung on a framework of Christianity and Christian influenced high magic, which is fine. I don't have an issue with that. And B, it's hard for people to bring it into the moment. I actually saw somebody post something the other day about UPG, right? Unverified personal gnosis, that everything we have in the moment was at one point new. We respect it because it stood the test of time and people have continued to see value in it and hand it on and hand it on. But when something new comes through, we're really quick to shut it down and say, no, that's unverified. It's, I think if something is like so dramatically counter to ancestral traditions, we should probably have our hackles raised. But generally, people who are doing the work, it's stuff that like boosts it, it adds to it, right? It gives it flavor and texture, and supports it as it is. So witchcraft, aside from the actual histories of witchcraft and how the villagers saw witches and worked with witches, and why an entire profession, lay profession of cunning folk and pellers and soothsayers evolved in these spaces to counteract the work that witches did. That should be like a huge inclination that we should think, why are there cunning folk if witches were respected and valued and cherished? It's because they weren't, right? And we can take this from pre-Christian, world too. So one of the big divergences is that wise traditions, herbwise traditions, cunning traditions are very squishy. They're very evolutionary, and they are rooted in the traditional style of teaching where one person quickens another person. There's years of study and apprenticeship and learning and questions and answers and experiments and trials and failures and successes before, maybe it's that the teacher dies, right? And it's that death that allows the fullness of their blessings to transfer over to the apprentice, who then steps up as the village wise woman, right? I'm not really sure how that would have went. I don't know that I've read anything in lore or fairy tale that gives inkling of that. I'm sure it's there somewhere. These witchcraft traditions are like, you have to do it this way in order for you to be doing it right. And sorceress traditions, animistic traditions, herbwise traditions are, you have to be doing it in a way that it works in order for it to be right? If it's not harmonious and beautiful and effective, then change it. Then adjust your relationship. And this is the beauty of this work, is that it is relationship based, right? That pretty much everything we do, when we do it in a way that is not reductionist, not prescriptive, not dogmatic, and not based on morality, but rather based on harmony and ethics, is that we tend to be learning directly from the plants that we're in relationship with. So when we're working with a plant in service of the flu that's moving through our village, a great deal of the wisdom that we're working has come from our herbwise elders, our herbwise ancestors. And a great deal of the wisdom that we're working has been revealed to us directly from the plants. And so people probably get sick of hearing me say, the foundation of this work is learning how to drop into heart center and receive gnosis directly from the world of the plants. But without that, everything gets really stale. There's a really good example that I bring up a lot. You may have heard this already before with with mugwort, right? Artemisia vulgaris, that we contemporary, witchy vibes folks on TikTok and Instagram, when you bring up mugwort, people will say, that's the herb for dreams, right? That's the herb that makes you have vivid dreams or will help you with dream incubation or, lucid dreaming, full stop, right? And then if the people know what they're talking about, they can go a little deeper into the medicine and the energetics. But here's the funny thing about mugwort. There's no folklore that I've ever found from anywhere where the artemisias grow that say mugwort is a dream incubating ally. She is an herb that will take people that don't dream and help them dream, or help you remember your dreams, or help you dream about things within a topic that you're asking for. No. Where did that come from? I don't know. The oldest back that I find it is around the 60s, the 1960s, not the 1560s, right? When things were really interesting. 1960s, with a couple of books on herb magic, people say, oh, mugwort for dreams, right? When we look at the folklore, the ancient ancestral stories around mugwort, we see this as an herb of initiation, an herb that teaches us, that clears pathways between the three cauldrons, helping us learn directly from plants. When we engage with mugwort in the ancestral way, we're learning from one of the plant spirits who taught all the other plant spirits, folklorically, right? So here's an example of an individual plant that has an ancient, timeless history of a particular set of virtues that she delivers and brings to us as a blessing, suddenly shifting because people become less interested in doing the hard, long work of investing in cultivating allyships, familiarships, and relationships. And this is my conjecture, by the way, and the closest overlap, the closest space where mugwort as a spirit can kind of like slide in her virtues is in the world of dream, which is imaginal and liminal, right? It's in the same place where those of us who do hedge crossing spirit work tend to do our work, right? So the brilliance of that, if you think about it, if you have enough connection to this work to really chew on what I just said, that we have a plant that showed up in a particular way since time immemorial, and then life changed and humans changed and things changed to a degree that we sort of stopped valuing the old ways and started valuing these other things. That plant, in a totally relevant way to who they are, found a way to stay relevant, found a way to pour from one cauldron into another. And that's what this is. That's what the continuity looks like. It's adaptable and fluid and relevant and harmonious and beautiful. And now mugwort is the herb for dreams. But 75 years, you could go back to talk to somebody Herbwise about mugwort and they would say, yeah, okay, but, right? Because they probably could see the crossover. So this is why I cherish and center these concepts of cunning work, of plant spirit path work, of sorcery, green sorcery, and gnosis in my work, above and beyond whatever affiliations I might have with any pagan traditions. If I were, for whatever reason, identifying as witch, which I don't, it would be the same there. If I was identifying as a folk Catholic or part of some cultic tradition, which I do, not folk Catholic, but yes, cultic traditions, it's all the same, right? It's plants coming back year after year, fresh and vibrant and relevant. So hopefully all this rambling gives you some food for thought, some things to think about, and some ways to deepen your approach to the work, regardless of what frameworks you have in place around you, because those are fine, right? You can do both. The permission is there. The plants don't care. Neither do I. So Questions, comments, I'd love to hear from you down in the comment section below. And I will see you next Friday for another one of our Free Friday community classes. Peace and blessings.